All right. Welcome to another edition of Free Arkansas, where we're going to explore the intersection of business and politics in service of a better Arkansas. I'm Andy McNeill, and today I've got Todd Simmons, who's the CEO of Simmons Foods. Todd, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Andy. I'm so happy to be here and appreciate you doing this podcast.
Yeah, well, I'm super happy that you're agreed to do it. I want to break down the dialogue into talking about you and then the company, and maybe you and the company, and then we'll talk about how it interplays with various things around Arkansas. But maybe we should go to the beginning. You know, it's a family business, and I'm going to talk about this business here in a second and I want you to talk about it as well. But as I understand it, you started in the business as a teenager. Is that right?
Yes. Out of high school, started working hourly jobs in our operations and in our live production area, and learning it from the ground up.
Did your father suggest you just go work on all different areas?
Well, he was suggesting that I probably shouldn't start too soon, because once you start working, it's hard to ever stop. And so, but his advice was, let's get you in the operations, working the jobs that our hourly team members work, so you better understand what we do. And so
they're hard jobs. My very first job was working in the Springdale turkey processing facility.
Yes, sir.
And I was an accountant, but what they wanted to do is they wanted to let me work for 8 weeks. I can't remember the time frame. And they put me in all these different jobs.
Yeah.
And the hardest thing I ever did was pulling a live turkey out of the cage and putting it on hawk locks. I don't know, did you have a job that you remember? You're like, oh my gosh, that is a hard job.
That is exactly a similar situation. Any of the roles before there was a lot of automation in our operations they're just really physically challenging. And it was good to learn that side of the business so that I could appreciate what our team members do, for sure.
Well, and maybe for context, I mean, I think that I just sort of did it that everybody just knows what Simmons Food is. But, if I said it in 2 words, it's a poultry company. How would you say it, in more words?
Yeah. So we have a chicken business, and we do restaurant and retail, further processed products, fully cooked and breaded. And then we have a pet food business that has grown to be nearly half of our revenue at this point. So we make finished wet pet foods, canned pouches and cups for retailer brands. And then we co-manufacture for big pet food brands as well.
Well, what I would also say, and I don't know if this is right information, but it's probably directly correct, I'd assume, but Arkansas Business has you as the 3rd largest privately held company in the state at $2.8 billion in revenue with just under 10,000 employees. And I would add spitting distance between number 1, and so
that's right. We're working it hard to get there, but who knows?
Well, and what I think is
growth.
I mean, everybody's trying to push for growth, and I want to talk about that, but I also wanted to say, that it's been a business that's a family business since 1949, which I find super impressive, and I want to ask you some questions about it. You guys, I guess, ship poultry to all 50 states, correct?
Yes, and probably about 20 countries right now.
So you're shipping stuff, and it's been an innovative company, right? So there's a number of things that you guys have done over time. The frozen tray pack, I think, is part of one of the things that you guys were involved with, if I'm right. And even
early
maybe
years.
Yeah, and so so is innovation still an element of the company?
Certainly, yes. And my grandfather really drove the innovation. He was a classic entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, and would try nearly everything to try to meet a consumer need. And I think we've carried that heritage forward in our businesses. It looks a little different today, but it's certainly been really a core aspect. And we call it be curious in our values. That's our core value that really sort of harkens back to the innovation piece.
I'm curious. I'm involved with different organizations that have lots of family-owned businesses. And so from experience, I know the family dynamics itself can weigh into these businesses and cause all sorts of issues. And since it's third generation, there's got to be cousins and other people around. Is that correct? You got, I don't know
Yeah.
how many
So
people are involved, but
it really is down to my father bought his sisters out of the business years ago, decades ago. And it's my sister and I and my dad who own the business. We have two kids each, Caroline and Charlie, and Asher and Sadie, who are growing up and moving through their teen years into college. And so we've got a fourth generation coming, and we're really trying to work hard to educate them as shareholders.
it is because one of the things I think that when I watch certain companies is, how do you create, and I'm just curious how you guys do it, that generation to generation versus people coming along and saying, you know what, boy, I don't really want to do this. I just want to sell it, right? Just give me the money, right? Because there's plenty of businesses out there. That's exactly what happens,
Yes. Yeah, I think that one, we work really hard as a family to sort of integrate the history and the stories of hard work, and not just of my grandfather, my dad, but of a lot of the team members who've been here in the leadership over time. And so we have family meetings every year, and we tour a facility, or we tell a story about a significant part of the company's history, just to try to create that connection. And it's, as you know, when you are part of a business that's a family business, it ends up coming through at the dinner table, maybe Thanksgiving dinner, and that can be negative and positive. And so you've got to be really careful how that comes across to some of the family members.
Well, of course. Well, I think one of the things I read about the business is that you guys were voted, and I probably don't have this exactly the nomenclature right, but like a great workplace for families and parents, which is really interesting, right? Because for people that have been around poultry processing, those are hard jobs, right? So
They're
you've
very
got
hard
to,
jobs.
so tell me more about that. Like, how does that translate in terms of how you treat employees?
Sure. So what we really try hard to do is meet our team members where they are. And one of those ways is we have built health clinics at our facilities at the location or very near, so that we can provide, if you're on our healthcare program, we're self-insured. So if you're on our healthcare program, you have free access to medical care, and we bring in specialists, art, dermatology, neurology, all of these different specialists on a regular basis, so that a team member doesn't have to take off for half a day to go see their doctor, because when they do, they're hourly, they're taking up to $150 to $200 pay cut to go take care of their health. So we've tried to do those types of things to really help, fill the gap for folks who are working, hourly jobs.
Just for me to like tell you how positive I think about that. When you look at the statistics on healthcare, one of the things that's happening is that there's this more specialization. So if you're in rural Arkansas and you want to see a urologist, a dermatologist, a cardiologist, or a neurologist, very, very difficult. Oftentimes you have to drive somewhere else. And that's even true on primary care physicians. 70% of Arkansas counties have a primary care physician scarcity. And so if you're saying, hey, what we do is, hey, look, we're going to bring them to you because we can do it at scale, I guess. And that's because most of the plants are in mostly rural locations, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, they are. And so they are, it's not necessarily a healthcare desert, but they are at least an 45-minute drive to a primary care physician, much less a specialist. So to your point, it's a commitment. And as all of us know, going to the doctor's office is not always a pleasant experience, even when you have quick access or a free schedule. So we try to make it as frictionless as possible. And it's at no cost for the team member to go and do a visit to one of our clinics. So that's helpful
Well,
too.
I wonder if that, that sense of making it good for employees, I assume it also makes it, good for the community. I know that if I were to look at some of your accomplishments, and this probably wouldn't surprise anybody, but you've been the chair of the National Chicken Council, voted industry leader of the year, and on I don't know how many boards, but a bunch of boards. And so, at least from reading that, it makes it make me feel like you want to give back to the community and to the industry. And so what I'll say about that, and I'm just in terms of how I think about what we're doing. So down in Russellville, there's a number of us, and it's a lot of people. So I don't want to make it sound like it's just like a few of us, but we really care about the community. And so we're willing to support all sorts of projects, from a vast array of them actually, but of course our resources are not the same. So I can only imagine that people come to you all the time with things that they think are really important. How do you decide and how do you think about the social responsibility, as the company intersects with the local community and let's just even say the state?
Sure. I think that certainly what we try to do is we have community liaisons at each of our operations. So they are out in that facility, in that community, and their job is to understand what the needs are. And we tend to lean into programs or opportunities to give that are related to education, related to youth, a lot of times youth sports, things that really build community. And then also, what do the police and fire and first responders need in that community? Those are the kind of, that starts it from out there. We then promote team building with our teams in the community. What are opportunities? And we have those community liaisons looking for an opportunity for the accounting team to go and volunteer at a children's shelter or whatever that might look like. I think beyond that, and my dad has done a great job of building a scholarship program that's named after my grandfather, Bill Simmons. And it's for kids of our team members and also our growers that are out there growing chickens for us, the farmers. And I think this year we gave out 118 scholarships in communities all over the country where we have facilities, and it equaled this year about $215,000. So
Excellent.
those are, and it can be kids going to technical school. It's not just college. We've got to get more kids that want to become plumbers, electricians, work on HVAC systems, that sort of thing. So we've been really working to promote that. And I think that, just to your point, builds a healthier community and certainly a healthier state for sure.
Do you, on a personal level, so do you feel this sense of responsibility, and are there things that have been going on in Northwest Arkansas where you say like, yeah, I've been behind those things? Because one of the things I think about Northwest Arkansas, if we were to look at, and I won't bore you with all the statistics, but basically it is definitely pulling the state forward. There's absolutely no question about that.
Yes.
From arts, medicine, rants. But one of the most impressive things to me is just what, Tom and Stuart Walton have supported, and just the biking trails, and people, I actually believe you have to almost see it to see the power of what it is.
You're right.
That, to me, this community is one of the things that happens to me. I travel a lot with what I do. And when I say I'm from Arkansas, over the years, I think that people will go like, oh, Arkansas, and they don't really know anything about it, right? If I'm in New York talking to bankers, they don't even want to come down. I've got to go to them, right?
Yes.
And so, but what I would say today is when we talk about Bentonville, Arkansas and Northwest Arkansas, I get so many more responses. We're like, oh, I hear awesome things about Bentonville, And so what are the things you care the most and like where you've leaned into it?
I think so. Certainly I've been co-chair of the executive committee of the Northwest Arkansas Council. So group of business leaders who are trying to help shape the direction and maybe funnel the resources toward the needs to keep Northwest Arkansas a great place to live and work. And so that's one that's maybe an 80,000 foot level perspective. Spent time as president of the Theater Squared Board, which is a regional theater that just does some amazing work. We've been recognized in the Wall Street Journal and in the New York Times, and that just creates a vibrancy in the community. I also am on the board of Alice Walton's School of Medicine, which I'm really excited about. I don't know a lot about a med school, but I'm learning, and I'm there more from a finance perspective. So I can look at a balance sheet and I can see a P&L and all those things. And so that to me is extremely important because we export billions of dollars of healthcare out of Arkansas, Arkansans that are going elsewhere to get their healthcare. And we have to build the base here of great physicians, great medical care for Arkansans, for all of our businesses to be able to thrive. And if we're able to bring $1 billion to $1.5 billion back here, that's huge for our economy.
Massive. Because our economy is, our GDP is about last year was about 150 billion. But to put that in perspective, Texas is 18 times that.
My gosh.
Yeah. And if you go every single state around us except for Mississippi, they're at least 2x or close to 2x. So I also think that some of the things I look at and think we need to change over time. I would also say we have a brain drain at times too. I would do this experiment at Russellville High School. For years, I used to hire the valedictorian, or the person I perceived was going to be the valedictorian. And in so many cases, if I go back for the many years I did this, it's kids now that live somewhere else. Right. And it might be for lots of reasons, but I'm assuming it's, the kind of job they want. Maybe it's the amenities. But I definitely think as people get older, safety, healthcare, access to things they want to do are really important. And so one of the things that I think is, and I'm just curious what you believe in this, and I'm going to layer a couple elements to this, is I think we need a professional sports team in the state of Arkansas. I actually think it needs to be an NFL team, but I know that is a very long putt. But starting with the soccer team that they're trying to put together in Northwest Arkansas, it's one of the few sports where you can envision maybe moving from a minor to the major league. And I think that that's another element of a rival in some ways. And so I think it needs to be a goal. I also think that the university, I sat on the higher education coordinating board for a while, and there's a lot to say about how I think how the universities function. But I believe that the University of Arkansas, that we all have a stake in that university, maybe in others too, but definitely. Yeah. And so, and even though people may pick on this opinion, but I also think it's important that the sports does really well.
Totally.
So I have this view that we need to support the NIL, not because I'm a fanatical fan, even though that might be true.
Right.
I think there is actually a logical business reason that says we have to compete. What do you think?
I totally agree. I think the opportunity on the soccer piece it's a long play in any professional sport, but certainly the demographics of that sport and the growth of that sport continue to just skyrocket. And so I think that there's a bright future there. I think that's a great thing. I think your point on NIL, and I think that a place to look is the John Calipari hire. For whatever you think about Calipari or whatever, it's amazing how I like him so much better now than when he was coaching for Kentucky. I hated him then, but all of a sudden I'm like, man, he's awesome. And so I truly believe that if you look at the number of the amount of media that the state of Arkansas received from that alone, and you look at some of the folks who are surrounding that, and thank you to John Tyson for helping make that available to the state of Arkansas and the university. But I'm telling you, it was huge, a huge positive impact. And I think that if you look at the impact of great sports on, let's say, the University of Alabama, Ole Miss, Clemson, as those sports programs, not a lot of people are old enough to remember when Alabama wasn't Alabama, right?
Right, of
From
course.
a
You don't have
sports
to go back very
perspective,
far,
we used to
right?
beat them, and
Yeah.
so now they're great in multiple sports, and so and they're and that's something that we've looked at studying at the Northwest Arkansas Council, but the economic impact of great sports in a university on the state and then on the university, the enrollment in the university, all those things are massive. And so I totally agree. I mean, you can argue all the negatives of NIL and all of that, but at the end of the day, we've got to compete just like we have to compete in business. We have to compete in our policies as a state. I think look, college sports is a huge business, and that our high profile and that really can
I think it helps
elevate
us.
the state.
One of the things, I want to talk about AI and robotics for a second, and how it impacts your business. But I'll start by just telling a story. Because this also gets to the state. Are you familiar with the Stargate project on in Abilene, Texas?
No,
Okay, so this is 4 companies: Oracle, MGX. I think I've got that right. It's a 4-letter acronym. Well, it's not an acronym, but it's the sovereign wealth fund from Abu Dhabi and the United Arab Emirates.
Yeah.
OpenAI and SoftBank, but they're putting $100 billion into a 12-acre facility. And and so I look at this, and it's going to consume a gigabyte or more. Now, Arkansas consumes per day 5 gigabytes. So it's basically 1/5 of Arkansas energy consumption. And it's all around, of course, AI. And so, and I have a couple different perspectives. One is I sit and say, like, okay, we've got a lot of access to energy in this state. We've got nuclear facilities. We've got natural gas, although it's a little more expensive to get it out. And I think, okay, we need to be playing in this game, because if not, people are going to go to other places. And you're going to see it, I think, where there's access to energy, where I think we have energy. And so I have this view about business development related to it, and I'm curious if you just have any sort of thoughts on it. But I'm also curious about this. How do you think that AI and robotics impact something like poultry processing? I mean, are we going to go out 10 years and it's going to be an automated facility that's super high tech with less people inside of it? Or where's it going?
For sure. I think that, from an AI perspective, what we see is certainly automated business processes that can help our current team members be much more productive and effective at their work. So I think that's a huge deal of pre-screening and almost exception reporting to team members who are processing transactions, let's just say. And so then in the operations side, there's currently a lot of automation, but from a true robotics perspective, where we're seeing that be most productive is in the packaging side of things. And they look like, we call them robots, but they look like these little spider things with like suction cups on them, and they pick the packages up and they orient the product and then put it in a case and that sort of thing. So very repetitive type motion jobs that are being replaced. And the cool thing is, though, then we have technicians. There's fewer people, but we have these very well paid technicians that are working on the robots, maintaining the robots. They become operators of these machines. And that's where the technical skill set coming out of high school and college is so critical. So
I just think there's so many interesting ways. Like I was with somebody the other day, and they're using AI tools all the time, and he was just trying to demonstrate it. He said he'd uploaded all of his blood work into a prompt in an AI tool, and then he literally took the menu, took a picture of it, and said, what should I have relative to my blood work? And then he took a picture of my food when it came and said, I don't really know what this is. Tell me. And I'll be danged that it just laid out exactly what I was having.
Amazing.
And I can only imagine that in like a poultry processing facility in the future, it can take a picture and go like, okay, this is what's going on here. I suppose there's still plenty of people in certain stages of primary processing and maybe less in further processing. I don't know, but it seems like it's going to be a whole challenging, be very, very different, and so, and I think to do that, I look at this and I go, wow, we're going to need a lot of power.
Yes.
China last year put in the equivalent of like I think they think they had 90 gigabytes worth of power that they put up in their country, and I think we put up zero, in terms
Terrible.
of new power.
I
So
agree.
I look at this and say, wow, the more this is going somewhere, and boy, we need to figure out how we're involved with it at state level.
I totally agree. I think if, Arkansas we're an agriculture leader. We become a leader in the steel industry. We've
Right.
got a lot of defense contractors. The point being there, why not the nuclear side of things with these smaller reactors where I believe, to your point, not only as a country, but as individual states, if we have the most efficient power and we have a surplus of power available or coming on, we will attract industry, and the industries that need power, AI, and certainly the robotics that follow that, that's going to be critical, and that's the future. And so if we want to build a future for Arkansas that's more positive, we got to start with a really efficient and robust power infrastructure. And so I'm all in on that.
Do you think, well, I'm curious in two different ways. From a state government perspective, so we could, whether it was Governor Hutchinson or Governor Sanders, what are the things that you feel like they're doing a really good job in terms of supporting your industry and your company? Probably more the poultry industry. I know they're all very pro poultry, so like I know that
Yes.
they're not
Right.
they're not
We
negative.
appreciate that for sure.
Yes.
And
But
yeah.
I'm curious, like, what do you think they do well?
I think certainly they listen. They're willing to listen, and they're smart people. They've got smart folks around them. The thing that I've seen versus other states, because we have operations in about 12 different states, and when we are interested in, and it probably helps to be a hometown company, right? But when we're making choices of where we're going to expand, Arkansas tends to be one of the top 3 most competitive in economic development. Now, they don't come forward, and I appreciate this as a taxpayer, they don't come forward writing huge upfront checks, and I think that can be a little dangerous for states that do that, because you're betting on a future that's, if you build it, they will come sort of, future. But they have come and been super competitive, whether it's tax rebates or if you do hire the folks that you say you will. There's a lot of different components that they bring to the table. And so I think AEDC does a really good job when I look at them in comparison.
Do you think there's things that they're not doing as well or they could do better? And I don't mean specifically the governors. I'm just talking about the whole state government.
Yeah. So I do think in general, infrastructure wise, we have opportunities. We have opportunities with our highways and with our certainly regional infrastructure here in Northwest Arkansas that we're working on. And that includes water, sewer, electric, and then our highway infrastructure. And so I think that's where a coordinated effort between the commerce groups and the RDOT and others working together, the Arkansas Department of Transportation, we have a lot of highway miles, and they are very challenging to build on, especially when you look at the Delta. I mean, it's not easy ground to build a highway that's going to stay in place. And so I think that's another place where a coordinated effort to really understand what the state needs in the infrastructure world and how we finance that. I think we've got some handcuffs on us today that I think we need to figure out a better way. And that's not saying people are doing a bad job at all. It's we need more tools in in the tool chest.
Well, I think one of the things that for me, I'll just see if you agree or disagree. This is almost more personal preference. So on the local level, one of the things that sort of got me early on interested in like dealing with politics in some way is that we would use a lot of other people's money to grow businesses. And from our perspective, we're creating jobs, we're moving businesses here, we're buying things, it's very growth oriented. And what I would want to tell people is, look, eh, you know, everything about you communicates something. My father used to say this, all things communicated. If I went out and I looked bad, my father would say like, son, comb your hair. It all communicates. And so, so in Russellville at times, there was different streetlights, sidewalks that don't connect. There might even be a zoning that we don't enforce for various reasons with signage, or like somebody who's abandoned a building. And so what I would advocate for is I would say, well, look, we need to be like Singapore. I don't know if you've ever been to, this is probably, I usually did not use this example, but I'll use it with you. If you go to Singapore, you land in the airport and it's super beautiful and you feel like you're in Disney World. And I'm sure the whole place doesn't look this way, but the main road does. And I would say at least the main roads for people that are visiting here, when they think about their capital, I don't want them thinking while they're driving to the location, like, oh my gosh, is this person going to be able to hire enough people from this place? So we need to create the right impression. So I was advocating for policies about putting power lines below ground, making sure we have good Wi-Fi. At the state level, my arguments are a little bit different, and this is just personal preference, but I feel like that there's too much time worried about social issues on both sides that
Yes.
don't really create any value. So if we want to create a rule around like books at a public library, I'm not even sure they're ever going to enforce anything like this, but we argue about a bunch of really dumb stuff that doesn't serve prosperity, growth, quality of life, standard of living. It doesn't
Totally
improve
agree.
taxation. Yeah. So
Yes.
I look at that and say like, oh gosh, that's just somebody like rattling the cage down there. And some of it I may agree with personally, where I say like, okay, like, yeah, I see your point, but mainly I find it like noise that doesn't really help us.
Very distracting.
It's
And I
distracting.
totally agree. And I think, it also creates opportunities for other people to have uh, create a negative narrative about Arkansas. And so
Correct.
I think the key there is focus on what's important to people. And really it's about, to your point, their safety and security of their family. How am I able to improve myself and my family economically? How can I have great education for my children and for them to build a better life? And all of us, just continue to move forward. And I think there are places where we certainly are doing that. I think
Yeah,
some
of
of the
course.
work that the governor is doing with education is very positive, but I do think people get very caught up in social issues, and I probably lean more libertarian in that realm.
Right.
Maybe not the strict definition of, but I think, gosh, let's focus on what people really need and care about, and that's what I believe folks are elected to do, to go down to Little Rock and work on the core issues that drive the state forward. The rest, to me, is waste. And
Right.
we need
Yeah.
to continue, we need to focus on the things that add value.
That I completely agree. So, okay, I'm going to flip it to federal stuff for a second because and I want to give you some statistics that I think I'm probably directionally correct, but there are, just to tee up the question on immigration. So there are, according to reports, there's about 53 million foreign-born people here in the United States, almost 16% of the population. 75% of them are here legally. That's a lot of people, all, actively employed doing something. The part that are here illegally, depending on what number you believe, but let's say it's, 12 million, so, presumably all doing something to earn a living, because you got to do something to earn a living. And so if we look at deportations across Obama's administration, Trump's and Biden, they were deporting, and I'm talking about the first Trump administration, they were deporting about 300 people a day. Okay. Biden moved it up near the end of his administration, about 700, and then Trump's moved it up a little bit more than that. Now, if we played around with the incoming people versus the outgoing people. We're not taking enough out that are coming in, if that's what you wanted to do. I'm curious on your view, because and I don't know how it works for exactly for Simmons Food, but greater than 50% of immigrants work broadly in meatpacking. So you're going to have more of an immigrant community, probably for lots of reasons. They're tough jobs, and people that get here that are super appreciative of getting a job, and so I'm curious how you view, what do you think about what's going on? Do you
Sure.
view just broadly, and then I'll take you down the rabbit hole of some of it.
Yeah, this is if I've been at Simmons for nearly 35 years, and it has been an issue for 35 years, and really our lack of a coherent immigration policy as a country and poor border security has put the responsibility on employers without the tools to know who is legal and who isn't. We work with documentation. We work with the tools that the government gives us, every tool that's possible. If you utilize those tools too aggressively, you also can be in violation of EEOC and discrimination issues. And so employers in the United States are stuck in the middle of of Democrats and Republicans who are not willing to work on a solution, and that's been decades.
Yeah,
and
it's been
I would agree frustrating.
Yeah.
So man, I can get way up on my stump. However, what I would say is, for all of us, it wouldn't take, a few generations, and every one of us is an immigrant. Nearly, there's very few that aren't, and so I think that the key for us is, how do we need immigration? We need the right kind of immigration from every aspect, from very highly educated technical people to folks that are coming over just working to build a better life on that first or second or third rung of the ladder, of the economic ladder. So it's a very frustrating thing, because you do see people who have family members who they're very scared of them getting deported, and of trying to figure out what the situation is. And it's not new. It's shifted. Certainly each administration has a different view of it. My perspective is, hey, let's actually put some rules in place and enforce those in a way on the front end. And I think, I'm not necessarily advocating amnesty for everyone at all, but we do have a large number of people, up to 12 million, whatever the number is, that are in our country working, gainfully employed. And if we allowed them to instantly have a green card and officially be employed and pay taxes and whatever that looks like, it would be much better than having a situation where they're having to work through a system of stealing someone's identity or creating false paperwork. I mean, it's just ridiculous what we do in this country. So that's, you got me on my soapbox.
Well, I mean, I start with this one position, which is, and I loved how, I don't know if you've seen this clip, but if you had never seen Reagan on his very last speech at the White House, he gives this story about, he starts off by saying, he's recanting a letter that he's received from a German or a story about this German. And he's basically saying what makes America great is the fact that you can come here and be an American. You can move to Japan. You can probably even become a Japanese citizen, but you can never be Japanese. Right. That doesn't, but here we've got this ideal view of the American dream, and we can say a lot about that, and you can come here and be a part of that. And I think that for me, that's a view about America. It's a little bit like if I was talking about Christianity, and I would say it's for everyone, right? It's not just for you and me and that's it. And so I like the idea of it's for everyone. And so, and mostly when I talk to people, no one has this different view from what you said for the most part. I was talking to Congressman Westerman the other day. He was like, yeah, of course we don't have a great system because we should. We need these people to come work. Now we can debate whether they become a citizen or how you become a citizen, but we might as well let them in and work, and at
Uh-huh.
least have some way of doing this. And I completely agree with you on the extra layers of companies. Hey, it's the company's fault, right?
Right.
Because you didn't follow the I-9 perfectly, right? And so, I mean, that's another soapbox. I mean, the,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
biggest one that I like, I call it TSA for small businesses, the Corporate Transparency Act that they passed. So like that one,
My goodness.
I just look at that and just shake my head. I don't know who came
Yes.
up with that idea.
Crazy.
Um, okay. I've got two more topics, and then I know we've been talking for a while here, but okay. I'm just curious how you think about tariffs. You know, and I'll just tee up an opinion, and you can kind of weigh into it. So I know that poultry is something that sometimes is a chip, right? Because there's so much poultry we ship overseas that if people get mad at us, hey, we're going to stop you're sending meat overseas. So I sort of view tariff as just a tax, so
Yes.
there's just no other way to say it. The businesses I'm involved with that have a tariff aspect, we're just going to have to raise pricing. How do you view just tariffs in general, and how do you manage that for, the company to kind of sort of see the future a little bit?
Boy, it has certainly been challenging the first 6 months of this year. I think that I'm not as concerned about a tariff on products from countries that is relatively low and is sort of trying to balance some level of trade where, hey, look, if China cars are a great example from Germany. Let's say that, our cars going there have a very high tariff, their cars coming here have a low tariff, and we're never going to be able to compete over there. Well, I think that's fine to have reciprocal trade agreements at some level. Generally, I don't think tariffs are a good thing. I don't think that's great. Now, people need to all be playing on the same playing field. China still has their developing nation status, and I think that's absolutely wrong. They're plenty developed.
They're plenty developed.
But I do think so. The thing that is really challenging for us is in our pet food business, certainly steel tariffs, tin plate steel. In the first Trump administration, when the steel tariffs went in, it was a major impact. And that was to help the steel industry, revitalize itself. Well, since that time, U.S. Steel and others have taken over 75% of tin plate production out in the U.S. So it is reduced by 75%. Tin plate is what we make pet food and food cans, vegetable, whatever. And so from an inflation perspective, it's a massive impact for consumers. And most of those consumers that are buying canned food, one, it's a food security issue because that's a way to store food.
Right.
Two, it's typically folks that are on the first 2 or 3 rungs of the economic ladder. And so I think singling out industries, if it doesn't have a requirement to build that capacity in, and in fact, they took capacity out and then raised prices by nearly double, that is a problem. And so that's not a great situation. And it's happening again with tin plate and aluminum. So, I think it will be interesting to see how this progresses, but it's sort of picking winners and losers, and that's not a great way to run.
No, I agree with that. Well, I think just a simple, silly example, I think that if you said, hey, look, T-shirts and trinkets and things like that, gee whiz, we're going to put a big tariff on that because what we really want to do is onshore some of this. I don't think either one of us would invest in a T-shirt, at scale, because we would say, well, gee whiz, they're still going to probably be cheaper than us, right?
Yeah.
And so they're still going to win.
Yep.
And why do we want to do that anyway? Because no one wants to do that. And and it's not really critical to any core strategy of the U.S. government. So some of it I look at and go like, I don't think they're going to get what they're looking for. Although I agree with you, there are certain aspects where I would say there's a logic that I could buy into pretty easily, for certain things, Hey, you're producing chicken somewhere else and you have no wastewater rules. You have no, you start listing all the issues that they don't have to do. I might say, you know what, look, they're polluting the planet. We need a tariff just
Right.
for their pollution,
Yeah. Yep.
something like that, so, um, one last question I'm just curious about, just because I'm just curious how's it going? And this is I'm totally switching gears here. I want to go back to the Alice Walton School of Medicine, and just like tell us like what's it like there? Because I think what's such a cool thing for the state to have this medical college, and I think we need it for so many different reasons. What's it like?
It is, hate to say awesome, but that's the acronym for her medical school is Alice Walton School of Medicine. And so she's extremely dynamic person, as you know, and when she puts her mind to something, and in this case it's trying to develop a medical education program that has doctors exiting with the whole health of the individual in mind, and really trying to do it in a very different and innovative way, and thinking about, how does art and nature and spirituality and mental health and all the pieces that create us as humans and make people happy and healthy, productive folks, how do you do that, and how do you not get lost in well, also, how do you make sure they have the technical skills and abilities to really utilize every tool that is available today for modern medical practitioners? So the amount of resources that have been put towards this is huge. But the really interesting thing are the partnerships. So they partnered with Stanford School of Medicine, which is run by an Arkansan, by the way,
Right.
Dr. Lloyd Minor, who is an awesome person, and he is the chair of the board. And so there's this cross pollination of folks from Stanford to here in Northwest Arkansas and vice versa. There's a huge effort to reach into the community and out into the Delta, other parts of Arkansas, to really figure out how to deliver healthcare, to your point earlier, in a rural environment as well. So access to healthcare, and I'm super excited. I mean, I think 3 weeks from now is when the first 48 students, first cohort, will be showing up. So it's a big deal.
Rex Nell. Do you know Rex down at the Arkansas Democrat Gazette?
Yes.
Rex has got this spiel that he does that I really like, and he basically talks about the history of Arkansas, and he says, we made a lot of bad decisions, and he's like goes through the things that in hindsight really work against us. So like being on the South instead of the North in the Civil War, right? Something like that had dramatic consequences. And so, but what I think is on the positive side, and he would say this too, I think, is for sure, Walmart. But what I would tell you is I think like Simmons Foods is right up there too. I mean, the fact that we've got businesses that have stayed here, that have continued to drive forward and participate, and and even just the ancillary things you do, like just making sure the Alice Walton School just becomes a thing, right? And so anyway, thank you for all of that, because I think it helps the state. And thank you for your time. I enjoyed talking to you.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much. And I'm loving what you're doing, and I appreciate it.